Honorable Chief Guest of today's function, Dr. Paul, whom we call our own Dr. Paul. The orator of the day, Dr. K.S. Reddy. Director, Dr. Srinath, my colleagues from the academic section, Associate Dean Dr. Lodha, Registrar Dr. Rath, distinguished guests, my colleagues, faculty, students, staff, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed my profound privilege and honor to welcome you all to this 70th Institute Day celebration. And I consider this special and unique in several ways, and one of this is that we have our own alumni, two people very eminent who are gracing the occasion as the chief guest and the orator together. So please give them a big hand. My job now especially is to introduce the orator. The Institute awards the Golden Jubilee oration on the occasion of Institute Day, which is given to a very eminent personality in the field of medicine who has made outstanding contribution. And in the past, of course, eminent people have delivered the oration, and today we have equally eminent, deserving, our own Professor K.S. Reddy, and I have the privilege of introducing him. You all know that, not all, maybe most of you know that he has been associated with the Institute over 50 years now. 51 precisely. He came in 74 and joined residency program in the Department of Medicine, and then did cardiology and became one of the most celebrated cardiologists in the country. He is also a trained epidemiologist, and he founded the Public Health Foundation of India as the founder president and remained there for over 15 years, I guess, or longer. He presently serves as the Honorary Distinguished Professor of the same organization. Under his leadership, 5 Indian Institute of Public Health institutions have been established to advance the multidisciplinary education and research in multi-sectoral application. He headed the Department of Cardiology for quite a length of time and was the first one to be awarded Bernard Lawn Visiting Professorship of Global Cardiovascular Health at Harvard University. And presently he is an adjunct professor at the Harvard, Emory, Sydney and Pennsylvania universities. He is the first Indian to be elected as an international member of US National Academy of Medicine, which is such an honor. He was the president of World Health Foundation in 2013 and 14 and co-chair of Health Thematic Group of UN Sustainable Development Solution Networks. He chaired the high-level experts group on universal health coverage constituted by the Planning Commission of India between 2010 and 11. He is a member of Global Panel on Agriculture and Food Systems for Nutrition, and he has served on several expert bodies of the WHO, Indian and international scientific organizations. He is an advisor on the health to state governments of Odisha and Andhra Pradesh with a cabinet rank. He has nearly 600 publications in the national and international journals and has published 2 books, Make Health in India, Reaching a Billion Plus, and another one is Pulse to Planet, Long Lifeline on Human Health. Among several honors that he received during his brilliant career, some of these are to mention our WHO Director General's Award and Luther Terry Medal of American Cancer Association for outstanding contribution in the global tobacco control, the Queen Elizabeth Medal for Health Promotion, and of course the Padma Bhushan from the Government of India, which is the second highest award granted to any person by the Government of India. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Reddy. And Dr. Reddy today, as Director said, is going to be speaking on making health research relevant and real world in the complex milieu. And I have the honor now to invite Dr. Reddy for the oration. Dr. Reddy, please.
Distinguished leader of India's health policy and comrade in arms and dear friend, Prof. Paul, dynamic director of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Prof. Srinath, other dignitaries from the dais representing the academic leadership of AIIMS, and all the fellow members of my very beloved AIIMS Parivar, as well as the luminaries in the audience and other honored guests. It's indeed a privilege to be back home, and I'm grateful to the AIIMS leadership for having invited me to deliver this lecture. The exhibition that Professor Paul inaugurated today clearly indicates the vigor and vibrancy of the scientific contributions of AIIMS, which are being translated steadily into application for public good. And the vast diversity of those innovations, which are clearly on display, need to be put to good use to help our population move towards Viksit Bharat with greater speed. However, when science has to be translated into policy and programs, there are several challenges which beset us because it's not an easy linear path. It's a fairly complex arena out there. And therefore, my talk would be essentially focusing on some of those complexities that we must address if we really want to put science to better use for public good. Because quite often we find translational barriers between knowledge and product, and between product and its application for betterment of health. And we need to address why such a straight path is often beset with difficulties and diversions, and that's where complexity comes in. And I will be dealing with complexity today in this translational process. I've always believed and stated that science has a social mission. Science is sterile if it lacks a social purpose and must connect with public policy, and public policy in turn will crumble on clay feet if it does not stand on the strong base of sound science. This is what I wrote in the National Medical Journal of India, which I had the privilege to edit while at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Science discovers, technology develops, and public health delivers, not only through the health system, which is its principal vehicle, but also by informing and influencing other sectors which are vitally relevant to health and through multisectoral actions. The mission of health systems is quite vast. They are expected to care and cure, prevent poor health, promote and educate about good health. And all these are on quite a good display in the exhibition out there. But we must also recognize that there is a cascade of health determinants. Quite often we focus on the determinants that operate at the individual level. Beliefs which are acquired, behaviors which are practiced, and biology which deals with a vast array of gene-environmental interactions. But these are again driven upstream at the level of the family and the community by cultural perceptions, priorities which are socioeconomic. Do I spend more on tobacco or alcohol or on food and education for the family? and pathways of access which are available and affordable. Do I have a smoke-free public place? Are there safe and pleasurable walking areas for community? Are there pedestrian pathways? Are there safe protected cycling lanes? These matter at that level. But even more upstream, we have at the national and global level factors which are driving the downstream factors, which are the stage and speed of development, the distributional issues of equity in multiple dimensions, and the demand and supply issues of trade. And we have seen all this happening over 2 centuries, which have influenced the nature of our health transitions, and where old challenges seem to fade, but new challenges appear. We have seen how industrialization and urbanization have driven the social, economic, commercial, and cultural and environmental determinants, and globalization, which constituted the tailwind of the 20th century, suddenly catapulted us into further public health challenges, while aggravating some of those which were pre-existing. So we have seen the non-communicable diseases surge globally, and we are seeing that in India. We are seeing environmental degradation. We are seeing substance abuse. We are seeing growing income inequality. We are seeing pandemic threats. We are seeing conflicts. We are seeing forced migration, whether because of climate or conflict. And we are seeing mass media manipulation with fake news. And while all this is happening, we are also seeing large number of debates proceeding at the societal level as to how to position health and development in the ambit of justice, whether it is social justice, gender justice, race justice, or climate justice. And talking about equity within countries, across countries, intergenerational equity, and equity in global governance, especially with global institutions of multilateralism now under challenge. So while our health system tries its best to cope with these challenges and provide a fairly effective response, we are seeing several challenges now still beginning to confront it. First is increased life expectancy because of aging. Virtually all populations are aging, including our own. While this is a celebration of science and sometimes of social transformation, but it is also posing a challenge in terms of health and well-being. So we see a concomitant rise in chronic illness, multimorbidity, frailty, and we see also technological progress also altering the scenario, and some of this technological progress is very real, like what we have seen outside in the exhibition, and some is imagined. And we see convergence of health and care needs. We see not only health needs, but a lot of care needs, not only for what are generally considered persons with disabilities, but across the life course now, particularly with aging populations. We see a fragmentation of services, mismatches between workforce supply and system demand, mushrooming of regulations and protocols, diminishing public trust in health professionals, and shrinking health budgets. Fortunately, thanks to Dr. Paul, we are not seeing the health budget in India shrinking as much as it is elsewhere. These are unprecedented and interacting challenges. They do not occur in isolation, but they are clustered and they cross-connect. And through research, we must advance knowledge for societal benefit in this very complex milieu. So we must translate knowledge into action, action to impact, and impact with equity. It's not enough if the impact is only benefiting a few sections of society, but we must ensure that there is equity. And for this, we must use research as a very potent instrument. And for the typology of research, we see we can classify research by purpose into exploratory research, elucidatory research, where we look at the causal connections, and we do then implementation research to try and implement effective solutions for the problems we have identified, and then evaluation research to identify how our interventions have worked. And we can also classify it by process as descriptive research, observational research, experimental research, both of which constitute quantitative research. And then we have qualitative research, and that's also very important, not only to understand what is wrong, but why it is wrong, something happening in society. And for this, we have the qualitative and quantitative methods now increasingly coming together to mixed methods research. But what's the purpose of public health research or health research overall? It is to provide evidence-informed, context-relevant, resource-optimizing, culturally adaptive, and equity-promoting recommendations for policy and practice. I'm not saying evidence-based, because evidence-based is often construed to be only clinical trials, but there's a lot of other information that can be obtained, both from observational research as well as from tacit knowledge of communities, which we must tap. And I'm not saying context-specific, because it may be applicable to other similar contexts. I'm saying context-relevant. I'm not saying resource-sensitive. We must say resource-optimizing, because we must utilize whatever resources are available at the moment, whether it's financial or human resources, and then try and raise the resources further in order to increase our spread and speed of transformation. Then, in terms of culturally compatible, I would say culturally adaptive and equity promoting. In this, evidence and equity are both non-negotiable. So, we must also recognize when we talk about the context, that context matters a lot. Information becomes knowledge only when it's placed in context. Without it, we have no way to differentiate the signal from the noise, and our search for the truth might be swamped by false positives. This is what Nate Silver, one of the best persons for predictive capacity, who predicted most of the state-by-state results in the US election, said that context is very important. And this is very clear. As a cardiologist, it became very clear to me that the same stress test result, 2 millimeter horizontal ST segment depression in a 65-year-old male with diabetes who is a smoker, is very different in terms of the probability of having coronary artery disease than a 24-year-old woman with anemia who may land up with a false positive stress test with the same 2 millimeter. And here is a nomogram where you can see that with the same type of stress test result, where the likelihood ratio of the test may be 2, but if you have a very different pretest probability of either 5% or 10% or 30% or 40%, you'll land up with a very totally different post-test probability. Equity is very important too. We have to look at equity in 2 dimensions. One is the horizontal equity and the other is vertical equity. In the context of universal health coverage, for example, when Dr. Paul and others are developing packages for universal health coverage, for progressively expanding Ayushman Bharat in terms of the benefit package, we have to think in terms of services which are available to everybody in society, particularly in primary and secondary care. And this is an essential health package. But we also have to focus on additional services or additional resources for those who have suffered an equity gap in the past and who may still find it difficult to access all the services in the future, even if offered. And that's where the vertical equity matters, where you require additional targeted services for disadvantaged or vulnerable people, services beyond the common essential health package. So when we talk about policy and say how policy needs research, we often think that there's a straight line between science, discovery, and demonstration, and policy for scale-up. But it's not such an easy straight line, unfortunately. what enlightened and most researchers complain, why is it that what we have discovered has not been taken up immediately by the policymakers? Are they having biases? Are they blind? Are they not able to see the truth when published? Well, it's not so easy. You have to put yourself in the policymaker's shoes. Enlightened policy needs scientific credibility, evidence and rationale, provided by biomedical, epidemiological and clinical research. Financial feasibility, is it cost effective? Even if it's cost effective, is it affordable? Or will one investment in one or two programs knock the budget out so that other programs will suffer? So this matters too. Then operational stability, is the health system capable of delivering the intervention? Is it adequately resourced in terms of human resources, financial resources? Is the program steerable, sustainable, scalable? This requires health system research or implementation research. Finally, it also requires political viability. Is there a ready and receptive constituency among the policymakers, among the parliamentarians, among the community representatives? Who are the forces supporting it? Who are the forces opposing it? This requires social science research. Unless you bring all of them into the mix, you will find that policy will not have an immediate uptake. So this again is a complicated area. There are many actors who actually participate in this process. It's not just the academic scientist or the policymaker sitting at the table. You have governments, you have international organizations, you have implementing agencies, of course you have the academia, you have the industry on one side, you have the judiciary, you have people making judgments which actually influence policy. You have the non-governmental organizations, both to advocate and to implement. Then you have the media, you have the legislature, and the interactions among them are even more complex. Dr. Srinath referred to me as a tobacco warrior. Well, let me tell you some of how these interactions take place in that arena. A lady in Kerala who was commuting by bus to her government office protested one day that people are smoking in the bus and the conductor is not taking any action against them when the smoking is impinging on her lungs and irritating her throat. She complained and an NGO took it up and filed a case. And Justice Narayan Kurup of the Kerala High Court gave a judgment that smoking must be banned in all public transport and if possible in all public places in Kerala. Inspired by that, a parliamentarian, Mr. Murli Diora, Member of Parliament at that time from Mumbai, took up the issue and with Indira Jaisingh, a prominent lawyer, filed a public interest litigation in the Supreme Court of India, saying why can't we have a ban on public smoking all across India. That was the time when India was also considering a national legislation for tobacco control, partly because of civil society advocacy, and partly because there was also an international tobacco control treaty under negotiation at the same time, the Framework Convention for Tobacco Control. So the government of India said, hold on, please do not pass a judgment in the Supreme Court. We are bringing forth a legislation, we are still considering it. And Supreme Court said, fine, but please bring a legislation for tobacco control. If possible, for banning public smoking, but also for other tobacco control measures. And that's how, under the very dynamic and dedicated and visionary leadership of Sushma Swaraj, and my fullest tribute to her, she led a very strong Indian tobacco legislation and simultaneously allowed the Indian delegation of which I was a part to negotiate a very strong global treaty in Geneva. And our national legislation was launched 1 month before the international treaty was concluded. And these are the interactions that go between science and policy. If we had only spoken of the damage caused by public smoking to people in scientific journals, nothing would have happened. And it is this complex mix of civil society, judiciary, political wisdom, and public support, and all coming together along with international forces in order to bring forth that legislation. Now, epidemiology, which is a principal vehicle for research, is gaining strength. It has excelled in independent attribution of variables to cause and effect while paying attention to interactions. In the era of microbiome and epigenomics, it has transitioned to adopt integrative epidemiology as an investigational platform and life course epidemiology as a field. The interactions between metagenome and superphenotype are being avidly studied. Social epigenomics and environmental epigenomics are burgeoning areas of research and potential application. We're seeing the transformation of the scientific field. However, has epidemiology become adept at studying complexity of interactions between multiple adaptive systems, or is it still sticking to the linear route that cause inevitably leads to an effect? Especially when many of them are rapidly changing, as I said. Has it helped to identify the critical points at which phase transition occurs? Reality is complex and first obeys the non-linear and multi-causal relationships, says an article written by Forde and Rock in Healthcare. Now, if you just wanted to see the veracity of that, just look at COVID-19. A virus comes in, it causes a disease, and we try and find vaccines to control it. But then some countries do it well, some countries do it badly, some states do it well, some states do it badly. Why is this happening? We have seen a tremendous amount of variability in transmission dynamics, droplets and aerosol, viruses and variants, with the virus rapidly evolving multiple variants, vaccines trying to be customized for the emerging variants, drugs, non-pharmacological interventions, policies and practice, international cooperation, again variable, and behaviors of individuals and groups. Some people accept vaccines and masks, others don't, others spread false information, and there are a number of unknowns. Complexity did not permit and does not permit purely linear models. And interestingly, preceding the COVID pandemic, there was an article written by two Princeton scientists which says all viruses are complex adaptive systems by themselves. And that complex adaptive system of a single RNA virus comes into a complex milieu of a complicated society, and therefore we see all the dimensions of complexity in action during the COVID pandemic. There's no point in saying this government failed or that government failed without considering all these interactions. Now, nutritional epidemiology is another area where we have progressed in our science from a fixation on single nutrients to food items and groups to composite diets, the so-called Mediterranean diet, and of course the Indo-Mediterranean diet, which is now being demonstrated by AIMS to be customized and effective in the Indian context. But we have also seen that we are advocating for dietary diversity but dependent on food systems to provide that dietary diversity. We are also seeing market forces coming in, and we need to control the markets. How do we mold the markets? And for that we also have to look at global nutritional governance. How are transnational products being transferred in terms of high ultra-processed foods being marketed? How sugar-sweetened beverages being marketed? So we have to look at consumer behavior, industry behavior, and government behavior. Enough of complexity there. So let me omit this slide. Complexity in cancer care is also science-related. So let's look at probability, complexity, and ambiguity affecting the cancer care, which is something that we are all familiar in the clinical milieu. And what causes uncertainty? Firstly, there is science-related uncertainty which is data-centered in relation to diagnosis, prognosis, causal explanation, and treatment efficacy. Then there are system-related uncertainties in terms of what is the structure of care and what are the processes of care. And there is a person-related uncertainty in terms of what are the psychosocial factors and what are the existential issues that the person is considering, whether a person with advanced cancer thinks life is worth living or not. So these are all the issues that are featuring at that level. And all of these come up together in a multi-dimensional manner. You have the scientific uncertainty, you have the system-generated uncertainty, you have the person-generated uncertainty, and these affect all through the whole chain from diagnosis to prognosis to causal explanation to structure of care, process of care, psychosocial and existential factors, and these will affect a variety of other disease-centered areas, like, for example, whether it's the life expectancy, the response to treatment, and many other areas of cancer care. So we have to deal with complexity in each of these areas without thinking of purely that here is a particular causal agent of cancer, this is the diagnostic test, this is the treatment we'll push, and A will automatically lead to B. Human health is also determined by a composite environment, and this is where we are talking about One Health now. If you look at microbes which are all around us in the environment as well as within our body as part of our microbiome, we also see, whether we are talking about nutrition, that nutrition is dependent on soil health, which translates to plant health, and plant health translates into animal health and human health when animals or humans consume the plants. And there are microbes even in the soil, the mycorrhizae, the fungi. All of these interact to decide what kind of nutrition we have. And water quality matters, air quality matters, and now climate change is transforming all of these elements. So again, we cannot draw linear relationships. And therefore, in a world where many complex adaptive systems connect and coalesce, the interface of human health and climate change must be positioned in the construct of One Health. And that's what we are now talking about, One Health being animal health, plant health, human health, and environmental health. As John Muir, a Scottish-American environmentalist said, quote, "When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it is hitched to everything else in the universe." Amidst this complexity, we must advance knowledge for societal benefit. Knowledge must move to action to impact, and impact with equity. Applying complexity science helps us to move forward despite uncertainty. It complements conventional science. It does not replace conventional science. It complements it, because conventional science, with its strength in basic epidemiological and clinical research, is still very much needed, and this is something that's being advanced by AIIMS so splendidly. But AIIMS needs also to bring in complexity science into its educational process while training students as well as researchers. What are complex systems? They've been defined as co-evolving multi-layered networks, elements interacting in a system which result in a behavior or an outcome that's more than the sum of its parts. Complex systems are highly composite. They're built from a large number of interacting subunits. Further subunits are often composite in themselves. Their repeated interactions result in rich collective behavior that feeds back into the system, into the behavior of the individual parts. Now, complex systems involve, therefore, many simple parts that are irreducibly intertwined. And the key premises of complexity thinking are that we must understand what they are. A large number of dynamically interacting elements, non-linear interactions. Please remember this, the key word is not a linear interaction. non-linear interactions, wide diversity of elements, emergence of new variables from the previous interactions of units and subunits. We have seen emergence of new variants in COVID. The virus was not static. It kept coming up with new variants, throwing new challenges at us. And unexpected variability, path dependence, self-organization, resilience. So all these are important elements of a complex adaptive system. In a complex universe, intervention A does not predictably lead to outcome B because there could be influences of other variables and interactions with C and D. But we must also differentiate between complexity and chaos. Chaos theory used to be very, very popular about 2 or 3 decades ago, continues to be so. Complexity is the generation of rich collective dynamical behavior from simple interactions between large numbers of subunits, whereas chaos is the generation of complicated, aperiodic, seemingly random behavior from iteration of a simple role, but chaotic systems have very few interacting subunits or units, but they interact to produce intricate dynamics. So if you're really trying to differentiate also between what is complex and complicated, then you have to look at this 2 axes. On one axis is the degree of interrelatedness, and the other axis is the number of components. When the number of components are few and the degree of interconnectedness is low, then you have a simple system. Whereas if you have high degree of interrelatedness, you have a relatively complex system. Then if you have many interacting components, but low degree of interrelatedness, you have a complicated system. But if you have a high degree of interrelatedness between multiple components, then you have a complex system. And how do we apply complexity science to solve a health problem? You may say, okay, all this is wonderful, theoretical, but what do you actually do it while dealing with a health system issue? First, understand the system. Take a holistic view. Identify the key components. Map the ecosystem. Second, analyze the system dynamics. Look for non-linear relationships. Identify feedback loops. Feedback loops are absolutely critical. Acknowledge the context. Third, design adaptive interventions. Focus on the whole, not just on the parts. Promote adaptation. Encourage experimentation and foster collaboration. Then monitor and evaluate. Track the key processes. Observe variation. Look for emergent patterns, because emergent patterns from the previous interactions of units and subunits is likely phenomenon. And learn from experience. We have seen some of this happening in systems biology. Systems biology is an interdisciplinary scientific approach that studies complex biological systems by focusing on the interactions between their components rather than on the individual parts. What does it do? It uses a holistic perspective, integrating experimental data with computational modeling and mathematical analysis from fields like computer science, engineering, physics, and mathematics, to understand how emergent behaviors arise from these complex networks, leading to a deeper understanding of biological phenomena and disease. Why is it that this has not come into epidemiology in a big way? Why is it that it has not come into clinical research in a big way? Why are we still stuck with linear models of A leading to B without looking at C and D? This is where complexity science needs to be built into our medical and health professional education. Because the spectrum of science is reductionist in content, but holistic in context. Understanding the system dynamics of a complex adaptive system requires a range of insights between biology, particularly evolutionary biology, epidemiology, information sciences, anthropology, sociology, psychology, behavioral economics, and management sciences. So an institute like All India Institute of Medical Sciences must provide the platform for the integration of multiple disciplines and promote complexity science not as a curiosity, but as an instrument to solve social problems and health challenges. And this requires training of health researchers in terms of crafting competencies of change makers. Complexity matters, big data from multiple sources. Context matters. We need to train them in Bayesian analytics and models, not just frequent statistics. Comprehension matters, mixed methods research. Caution matters, estimating uncertainty. We have to recognize that we have to live with a certain amount of uncertainty, but estimate it. Communication matters, clear, coherent, consensus-building communication, if science has to communicate to policymakers and to public. So, energizing the community is also important for participatory research, policy advocacy, program design, program delivery, community-based monitoring. So what we really need to aim is for people-partnered public health and digitally enabled decentralized decision-making at the district or block level for effective implementation. And big data integration is absolutely important. As Edna St. Vincent Millay wrote in a poem, quote, "Upon his gifted age, in its dark hour, raised from the sky a meteoric shower of facts. They lie unquestioned, uncombined, wisdom enough to leach us out of our ill, is daily spun. But there exists no loom to weave it into fabric." So we need to bring all of this big data together and ensure that we can actually build an interdisciplinary tapestry rather than let these individual skeins float around. Will technology enable us to quickly overcome health system challenges? It might, it does, but as Doug Engelbert says, quote, "The capability infrastructure requires the co-evolution of the tool system and the human system." We have to train our health scientists and researchers and the public and others in the health system, from managers to service delivery people, how to use their technologies. Merely salivating over new technologies is not enough. We must ensure those technologies are understood, absorbed, and utilized effectively. And that, again, is the responsibility of institutions like AIMS. And as Jeffrey Sachs says, epidemiology in the age of sustainable development also must evolve. In an era of profound change and threat, epidemiology stands as the foundation of our public health response, providing the rigorous data, modeling, and analytics to identify and anticipate disease burdens at the population level. Epidemiology itself must become global and systemic, meaning in particular that the big data generated by our information-rich global society should be systematically harvested and harnessed for insights and warning signs regarding public health. He goes on to say, epidemiologists should be trained in the broader dynamics of global systems change to anticipate the roles of climate change, habitat loss, water stress, pollution, lifestyle changes, dietary patterns, and other social determinants of health, including substance misuse, depression, unemployment, forced migration, social exclusion, aging and loneliness, and so forth, in what is likely to be a rapid change of disease burden, including many new and major challenges. And for this, the universities and institutions like AIMS must play a stellar role. What we need to create are T-shaped individuals. The vertical limb represents in-depth expertise in certain disciplines, whereas the horizontal limb says that you also have to have transdisciplinary thinking and real-world awareness to interact with other disciplines and other systems to understand where we must work together to solve complex problems. And while doing that, we must also repeat to them Louis Pasteur's wise advice to his own young researchers, quote, "Keep your enthusiasm, but let strict verification be its constant companion." conclude, Stephen Hawking said a few years ago, before his death, I think the next century, that's the 21st century, he said this in the previous century, in the last decade, will be the century of complexity. We have already discovered the basic laws that govern matter and understand all the normal situations. We don't know how the laws fit together and what happens under extreme conditions, and we saw that during COVID. But I expect we will find a complete unified theory sometime this century. There is no limit to complexity that we can build using those basic laws. And as Victor Hugo said, quote, greater than the march of mighty armies is an idea whose time has come. Ladies and gentlemen, complexity science is an idea whose time has come. Thank you very much for your gracious invitation and for your generous attention. As Simone Weil says, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. I'm most grateful for the honor conferred.
Thank you, sir, for your inspiring oration. Now I request our Director, Professor M. Srinath, to felicitate Professor K. Srinath Reddy.